Today we're going to be learning Yevamot daf pei bet. This is the daf for Shabbat. We are going to start with a bit of review from the previous page. Okay, we started with Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. They had a machloket. We started with this androgynous, and then we said that androgynous allows a woman, this is a man with both male, or sorry, not a man, I shouldn't say that. We're going to see later, they treat him like a man, but it's an androgynous who has both male and female genitals. So now the issue is, what is the status of a wife of a person like this? So Reish Lakish says, machila betruma, but not the chaze. She can eat the truma of her husband, right? If she's married, if he's a kohen, but not the chaze, not the parts of the sacrificial items. Rabbi Yochanan said, even chaze. So now the question is, why? Why is there this distinction? And we said Reish Lakish holds that truma in nowadays is Rabbanit, and what he really meant to say was when it's the time of chaze, the time of the temple and everything's Torah, then the woman is not allowed to eat it. But nowadays, when it's the time where there's only truma, and then truma is only rabbinic, that enables her to eat the truma. Okay, that's why, because it's only rabbinic. Rabbi Yochanan says, "What are you talking about? It's only rabbinic." And Reish Lakish says, well, I'll prove it to you. How do we know the truma is nowadays is only rabbinic? Because igul be-igulim ole. I'm at the bottom of Pei Aleph, Amud Aleph. If you want to follow a little bit this inside, I'm going to jump around just to do a review. If you have this pressed figs and you have one that's truma and it's mixed up with the other ones, it's nullified. So what do you see here? Normally, you would call this something that's generally sold by item, which means it has chashivut, it's important, which would mean it's not nullified. So why could this be nullified then if it's something of importance? Remember, it's something that's sold generally by items, like how many cakes of pressed figs do you want? But sometimes you'll buy a bunch together for a basic price without counting how many exactly. So if that works, then it only works, laws of nullification work because truma is rabbinic. That's what Reish Lakish says. Comes Rabbi Yochanan and says, what are you talking about? I'll prove you wrong. Chaticha b'chatichot ole also. Meat in a pile of, right, if you have sacrificial meat next to non-sacrificial meat, it'll also be nullified, one another, or maybe tameh or not, right? We're going to get to what exactly that is. That's where we ended yesterday. What exactly these chatichot are, we'll get to it in a minute, but pieces of meat can nullify each other. And we're talking there about sanctified items in the time of the temple and their Torah level prohibition. So you see even Torah things, even though, and a piece of meat is sold the same way this cake is sold, normally by item, but sometimes by estimating. So it says, and obviously you have it all wrong because you think kol shadar kol imanot, anything that normally gets sold by counting, even if sometimes is considered of our chashuv, but I read it as et shadar kol imanot, and what, that was another source that we saw, what they read. Okay, I'm not going to get into all that, but I think it's only things that definitely, that 100% are sold by minyan are the ones that aren't nullified, but igulei tvela, the pressed fig cakes, and the pieces of meat all get nullified in a mixture because they're not considered an important item. Okay, so now the Gemara then wanted to know, what is this whole machloket about chaticha? Okay, what's this chaticha b'chatichot? What are we talking about? And they bring another braita to explain. A chaticha, okay, we're going to start from here. It's the middle of Pei Aleph Amud Bet. Chaticha shel, because this we're going to deal with a lot today, so I want to read it inside. Chaticha shel chatat tme'ah shenit'arva b'mea chatichot shel chataot torot. You have one piece of a chatat, of sacrificial meat, which is impure, which got mixed up with other sacrificial meat, which is pure. Or the same thing with the showbread. Okay, again, it's impure with pure. I'm not going to read everything. Ta'ale, this works. This can be nullified. Okay, and that's Rabbi Yochanan's proof. You see that pieces of meat can be nullified in a mixture. Rabbi Yochanan amar lo ta'ale. He says no. Aval, but when it comes to, okay, Rabbi Yehuda thinks this doesn't work because he holds anytime you have min b'mino, two of the same item, laws of nullification don't work. Okay, what's interesting about this stuff is we're going to get into a lot of basic laws of nullification, which we'll see in other places in the Gemara. This is one of the basic sources. But if it's chatat and chulin, but nothing's impure. It's just the matter of, is it only for the Kohen to eat, or can other people eat it as well? Or, right, prusash alechem apanim Torah, or bread, showbread, which is mixed with regular chulin bread, divrei kol lo ta'aleh. That does not work. Okay, we talked about it yesterday, that what's the reason it doesn't work? Because generally, although we'll see some other things today, but generally we say it doesn't work because theoretically you could give it to a Kohen. Normally laws of betrothed will work if we need them to work. But if there's some way to not have, because, why? Because there's a huge financial loss. Here, there's not a huge financial loss because you could just sell the whole thing to a Kohen. You'd have to sell it for a bit of a lower price because he knows you're stuck and, that's how it works. But you still would get money for it. It wouldn't be such a huge loss. So we don't let betrothed work in this case. So now the main point here, they said, third to the bottom line here, katani miyat reisha ta'aleh. But what does it say? Meat in meat can be nullified. So that's right, a good proof of Rabbi Yochanan against Reish Lakish. So now we have to understand, how's Reish Lakish going to read that braita? Because he thinks truma is de Rabbanan, and that's why it can be nullified. But if it was the yulei dvela, couldn't be nullified if they were deoraita truma, and this is deoraita, so how could it be, right? This is by Torah law. So we're going to have three answers. And in each answer, we're going to ask some questions, and some of them, the questions are going to stay on. The first one, actually, we're going to answer all the questions. The other two, we're going to actually have difficulties that won't be resolved. It's when the meat gets crushed. When it's crushed, it's already not important anymore. Baruch Hashuv has to be something respectful. This is not. It's crushed, smushed meat. It's not good. So, ihachi, my time is Rabbi Yehuda. If you're going to say it's crushed, why would Rabbi Yehuda then say it's not nullified? It should work then. Because Rabbi Yehuda l'ta'ameh, I told you this already, Damar bim bimino lo batil. He never allows two of the same item. It doesn't matter if the meat is smushed or not smushed. Meat and meat don't nullify each other. So wait, avaloni mochamai. So then you're going to say, if you want to say that, then Reish Lakish, the way he reads this braita is it's only because the meat is smushed. But if the meat wasn't smushed, it would actually not be nullified. Avaloni mochamai lo ta'aleh. If you really think that, well, then the braita should have read differently. What did the braita do? It brought a case of pure and impure meat, right, that was sanctified. And then it brought a case and it said that is nullified according to the rabbis. But the case of chulin and kodesh, right, kodshim and chulin, sanctified and non-sanctified items, that's not nullified. If you wanted to say it's smush meat and non-smush meat wouldn't be nullified, then that would have been a much better case for the braita to have brought. If they want to compare this, this is a machlok at Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis, but this they all agree. It should have said, when it's smushed, it's a machlok. When it's not smushed, they all agree. That would have been a much better, so like comparing A and B rather than A and D, right? You're jumping to start switching from tamei and tahor to chulin and kodesh. So that's exactly what the Gemara is going to say. If that's the case, aditane, when it says aval chaticha, right? But a chaticha of chatat tehora, pure chatat, shenitava b'mea chatichot shel chulin tehorot. Like chatat, I'm just reminding you, chatat is the meat that the meat of a sin offering goes to the Kohen, right? Most part of it gets burned, part of it goes to the Kohen, and that's it. The owners don't get any of it. So chatat tehora shenitava b'mea chatichot shel chulin tehorot lo ta'aleh, right? Because it says that, it would have been much smarter to say should have distinguished a different distinction. It should have said in the middle of that braita, after Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, disagreeing with Tanakam, it should have said, in what case are we discussing? It should have said it and spelled it out, really. And additionally, avaloni mocha lo ta'aleh, and the contrast opinion case should have been if it's not smushed. So what does the Gemara answer? That's not really a good question because Torot b'Torot adifle. We'd always rather, we preferred to give a case to show that even pure with pure, okay, right, pure sin offering, meaning didn't become impure, and pure chulin, when it's pure and pure together, it's actually a bigger chiddush to say it's not nullified. Because there would be more likelihood to say, since everything's pure, it would actually be nullified. Why is there more likelihood to think that? So Rashi quotes, I'm not going to get into it, but a Mishna in Trumot, which basically talks about how when it's truma, pure truma mixed up with pure chulin, it actually gets nullified. And if it's truma that's impure with pure truma, actually there's a machlokah Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. And in the end, we say it is, But because there's a machloket about that, it's more likely everyone agrees when it's Torah and Torah. And this is a unique case where we're not going to allow it. Okay, but the point is, that's why we want to stress that point, because you might have thought the opposite logic. It would be less likely, right? You'd be more likely to say it would be nullified in that case, and they want to tell you that it's not. So that's a unique reason why that's mentioned, and it doesn't mention if it's not smushed. It still doesn't really answer the question why you didn't specify, by the way, it's what we're talking about, that it's smushed. That's a little bit of a weak point. So now they say, wait a minute. Well, Reish Lakish, Mishna Reisha, Mishna Seifa. Still, we're going to have a problem with understanding Reish Lakish according to this understanding. If it's smushed, so why is there a difference between the Reisha and the Seifa? Why in the Seifa do they all agree that it's not nullified? Amar Rav Shisha, Berei de Rav Idi, Reisha b'truma mashkin de Rabbanan, Seifa de Oraita. He's going to say, it's a difference in the Reisha and the Seifa because the Reisha is talking about impurity, and it's impurity on a rabbinic level. Again, we're going to get into saying, even though it doesn't say so, we're going to assume it's referring to rabbinic level truma. What's that? Truma mashkin. This is it. Normally, utensil, right? Like a rishon can turn food and drink into a sheni or something like that. But food, right? If you have, let's say, something that's a sheni, if something like a liquid touches a rishon, the liquid will be a sheni. It doesn't usually pass on, right? What the rabbis instituted that a mashke jumps it up a level. If something touches a rishon, a liquid, and then that item touches something else, it turns it into a rishon. Usually everything goes down a level. In this case, it goes up a level. So basically, we're assuming that what happened was the meat got impure by touching a liquid that had come in contact with a rishon or something like that, and it's a truma de rabbana. Since it's rabbinic truma, it gets nullified. And the end of the Mishna is obviously, the braita is talking about Torah level, which is a non-Kohen can't eat stuff that's specified for the Kohen. That's a doraita halacha. So that's why it's not nullified. Totally different than what we thought before. Aval, so wait a minute. According to this, you're going to say then, aval tumat sheretz ma lo ta'aleh. So then if it's tumat sheretz, right, which is doraita, not this tumat mashkin derabanan, but sheretz comes in contact with the meat. Right? Sheretz falls on it, a dead creature. So now you're going to say, because it's doraita, it's not nullified, even though the braita said tuma, but it wasn't referring to that kind of tuma. So then again, we're going to have the exact same question we asked before. Adatani seifa, since the seifa already comes and brings the contrast case. That was the case mentioned in the Mishna, in the braita. It should have specified there a different case instead. It should have said, it should have said that's only referring to tuma on a rabbinic level. But tuma that's on a Torah level, low, shouldn't. So again, they answer the same question, Torah b'torot adifle. They still wanted to stress to you that if you have two pure items and one falls into the other, we're not going to allow it. Even though you might have thought there's more likelihood we would allow it to be nullified, we don't allow it to be nullified. So that was all the first answer of Reish Lakish. If he holds truma's doraita, then how does he, I'm trying. If he holds truma, I'm confusing all my terms in my head right now. If he holds truma, right, the food the Kohen eats, is only midrabbana nowadays, then what's the problem with this braita? Why is it not nullified? And the answer, why is it nullified? This is Torah level, right? This isn't truma d'Rabbanan. This, according to Reish Lakish, only d'Rabbanan gets nullified, d'Oraita doesn't. So how do we read our braita? And they say, because it's talking about where it's smushed. And if it's smushed, then it already drops at a level to d'Rabbanan. Okay, and then we also said it could be it's tumat mashkin, and that's why. Okay. Rava Amal, Reisha Isur Lav, Seifa Isur Karet. There's a different reason. What's the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa, and why, even though it's Doraita, normally it's not nullified, but Doraita, it's not nullified, would be something that's severe like Karet associated with it, like Kodshin. But in the Reisha, it's talking about impure meat. It's not talking about some stranger eating sanctified items that are meant for the Kohen. That's a Isur Karet, but it's only an Isur Lav not to eat disqualified meat that became impure. So, coming in contact with it or anything, I guess. So now, the Reisha is Isur Lav, Seifa is Isur Karet. That's what we're going to be more lenient about an Isur Lav. However, the question Rabbi is saying, he's the one who said, Kol b'doraita, lo shne Isur Lav, lo shne Isur Karet. When the rabbis instituted things about things that were related to the Torah, doesn't matter whether it's a lav or the karet, it's all the same. So if they said that this isn't going to laws of nullification aren't going to work. It shouldn't work across the board, even in a low chaze. So that's not a good answer. Kasha, they end with a question on him. Third answer. Rav Ashi Amar Seif Mishum Dahavele Davar Sheyesh Lo Mitirin. This is a unique category in laws of betul, very famous category. If something is ultimately going to be permitted, then we don't allow it to be nullified. We learned this in Masechet Beitza, for example, with a beitza shenolda, an egg that was born on Yom Tov. So we say, since today you can't eat it, but tomorrow you can eat it. So if it fell into a bunch of other eggs that were born from the day before and would be permitted on Yom Tov, normally we don't allow you because just wait till, right, well, now the question is why, but this is a davar sheyesh lo matirin, and davar sheyesh lo matirin, we're going to read it right now. Chol davar sheyesh lo matirin, anything that eventually will become mutar to you, afilu be'elef lo batal. Even 1 in 1,000 won't be nullified. So one egg falls into 1,000 eggs, no can do. So this is the same thing. This right now, okay, why is it a davar sheyesh lo matirin? It's not exactly, and we're going to see the Gemara is going to reject this, but it's permitted to a Kohen. It has a heter somewhere, right? It's not permitted to a regular person, but it's meat of a chatat. A Kohen can eat it. So therefore, we can't let laws of nullification apply to it. Whereas the Tane case was impure, nobody can eat it. It's supposed to get burned, right? So because of that, the first case, we allow it, this we don't. Now, before we go on, I want to tell you a very famous machloket. We'll learn this a few more times, but try to say it every time we learn it. Davar sheyesh lo matirin, there's a famous machloket, Rashi and others, versus the Ran in Nedarim. The Ran in Nedarim has a unique opinion. First, we're going to start with Rashi, which is the simple. Rashi basically says the reason why is because just wait, okay? A little savlanut, a little patience. Wait till tomorrow, wait a week, whatever it might be, depending on whatever case it is. It'll eventually be permitted, okay? But the Ran says that's not why it works here. The reason why it doesn't work is because it goes back to conceptually, how does nullification work? Nullification works because you have two different things operating. But remember how Rabbi Yehuda said, min b'mino eino batel. Two of the same item, meat and meat, can't nullify each other because you have to have opposites. Like opposites attract, right? Opposites, you have two different things, one can swallow the other, like the classic milk into a pot of chulin, right? You lose the milk. If you put a piece of meat into a pot of chulin, like non-kosher meat, that meat is just like the other meat. You can't say one nullified the other. There's meat in there. You taste the meat flavor because it enhances the meat flavor that was already there. So you can understand the concept of min b'mino lo batil. So now, what is min b'mino? How does it work? Generally, laws of betul work even if you don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda and you think min b'mino does cancel, but you always have two different types because you have isser and you have heter, right? You have like something that's permitted that fell into something that's forbidden, like here, right? Your chatat fell, or your chatat that's tameh fell into the chatat that's tahor. So one can nullify the other because they're different. But if you have something that eventually is going to be permitted, then it actually is not so different inherently from the item that's permitted, because eventually they'll be on the same level and they'll both be permitted. So that makes it less capable of laws of nullification working. That's how he understands it, which is very interesting conceptually. Okay, we're going to move on though. So now the Gemara says, what are you talking about? This is davar sheyesh lo matirin. It's a joke, or it's wrong, it's a mistake. It's different interpretations about beduta or baruta. Baruta is like chutz, it's on the outs. Okay, why? Leman, for who is it a davar sheyesh lo matirin? Davar sheyesh lo matirin means it's forbidden now and it'll be permitted later. Ila kohen, if you're looking from the perspective of the kohen, mishra shari, it's already permitted. Ila Yisrael, olam asur, if it's for a non-kohen, so it's forbidden. So this isn't a classic case of a davar sheyesh lo matirin, and therefore elahad Rav Ashi beduti. It's not a good answer. So in the end, we're really left with the first answer, which is the braita is talking about a case of nimocha. It was smushed, and therefore it's not davar chashuv anymore. And that's why, even though Reish Lakish normally holds that if it's d'oraita, laws of nullification won't work, they specifically work here. And then when it comes to truma, laws of nullification only work for truma because, or again, this issue with the suffix of the androgynous, he can feed his wife truma because truma is only derabanan. Okay, and that's all. Truma is only derabanan. And when we say gulei dvela, right, our ole is the reason betul works for them is because truma is only derabanan. Now we're going to flip to Rabbi Yochanan. So according to what we said, Rabbi Yochanan disagreed with Reish Lakish there and said, I don't agree with you because truma is d'oraita. And that's why he said, if we allow the androgynous to feed his wife truma, then we allow him to feed her chaze v'shok as well. Savar Rabbi Yochanan truma b'zman hazeh d'oraita. Does he really hold that way? V'hatanya, there's a braita. First we'll learn the braita, then we'll learn what Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan say on the braita. We're going to see that Rabbi Yochanan explains it that truma is d'rabanan. Okay, here's another famous case. Shtei kupot, echad shel chulin ve'echad shel truma. I have two big baskets. One is full of truma fruits, one is full of chulin fruits, non-truma fruits. Lifnehem shtei sein. And then there's two baskets in front of them. So there's echad shel chulin, echad shel truma. I have two baskets filled with some fruits. Let's assume there's less fruits in the basket than in the big box. V'naflu elu b'toch elu. Somehow each basket got dumped into a different box. Okay, so we now have a box of fruit. We dumped another basket of fruit into that box, and the other box has dumped from the other section, the other basket. Now we don't know who did it. Okay, and right, you think maybe this is crazy, but no, it's actually very common. Right, I set aside my truma in my house, and I didn't tell my kids which one was what. And then they went and just dumped one into the other and didn't realize. And then I come into the kitchen, I said, oh no, what happened to my basket? And then no one remembers which one was where and what was what, and nobody knows. So, this is very famous. We assume, it's very interesting. We assume that whoever dumped the truma, right? Whoever dumped the truma into the truma and the chulin into the chulin. We can make that assumption. We're going to have some questions on this, how, exactly what. We're not going to get exactly, but it seems to work. So now we're going to say, what's going on here? So Reish Lakish says, V'hu sherabu chulin ala truma. This only works if there's more truma than, more chulin than truma. What he means is, if what it fell into had more fruits than the other. Okay? So, the Rabbi Yochanan Amar, even if it's not rov. In other words, Reish Lakish seems to say, even if maybe you really threw the chulin into the truma and the truma into the chulin, laws of rov will basically say this works. Rabbi Yochanan says, even if it's 50-50, it's fine. So now, this another Reish Lakish, he fits in perfectly with what he holds. In other words, even though truma is only d'Rabbanan, in order for this solution to work, we could say this, what they call sha'ani omel, that I can just assume, we can assume that probably the truma fell into the truma and the chulin fell into the chulin. Right? Part of it maybe is because we assume that I kept the truma near truma and I kept the chulin near the chulin, and if one fell into the other, probably it was the right one. But this is all, right. Because even if it didn't, it's batal b'rov. In other words, maybe that's not enough. But in a Rabbanan, rov is enough. But Rabbi Yochanan, it's really difficult to explain. Kasha. Number one, he's saying it's doraita. And number two, he doesn't even have rov. So that really couldn't work. So what's the answer? Don't take Rabbi Yochanan seriously or don't take him literally. Hamane Rabbananhi. Va'ana da'amreke Rabbi Yossi. Okay, turning out I'm a bit. We explained that Rabbi Yochanan is basically saying that I was just explaining that braita. That braita goes by the rabbis who hold the truma b'zman hazeh d'Rabbanan. I don't think nobody holds that. I just don't hold that way. I hold like Rabbi Yossi, who says truma b'zman hazeh, truma nowadays is d'oraita. How do I know Rabbi Yossi says this? It's Tanya b'Seder Olam. That's a book that existed then. So in Seder Olam, it says, it's Tanaitic source. Asher yashu avotecha v'yirishta. Okay, it's a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 30. It says, God will take us to the land that Yarshu avotecha, that your fathers inherited, v'yirishta, you will inherit it. Notice, it talks about two inheritances. Your fathers inherited and you inherit. So what is it, Darshan, there in Seder Olam? Yerusha rishona u'shniya yesh lahen, u'shlishit ein lahen. Notice there's two and not more. That means there's the first Yerusha, when they got into the land in the time of Yoshua, through all of the first temple period. Then they left, they got exiled, out went the Kedusha, there is none anymore. They came back and inherited a second time, and the Kedusha came back, right, the sanctity, which would make truma deoraita, by Torah law. But shlishit ein lahen, that means the second sanctity lasts forever. So that's why truma b'zman hazeh continues to be deoraita from the second temple period time. Rabbi Yochanan, how did he get to the fact that this is Rabbi Yossi? Because Rabbi Yochanan holds man tana Seder Olam, Rabbi Yossi. Who's the one who wrote Seder Olam, or the opinions are attributed to him? Rabbi Yossi. So he basically says, don't question me from the braita, because that braita is the rabbi's opinion, but I hold like Rabbi Yossi. So yes, I explain that braita according to the rabbis that it's only the Rabbanit. Now we're left to explain another thing about that braita, which is how could he say 50-50 works? There's no laws of rov. So now, Sava Rabbi Yochanan b'Durabana lo b'ina ruba. You wouldn't need rove in a Durabana. V'hatnan, doesn't it say about a mikveh? Now, a mikveh needs to have water that either is rainwater or water from a stream, but not water that you drew from a well or something. So now if you had a mikveh, sheyesh bo 40 se'ah mechubanot, it has exactly the minimum amount required, 40 se'ah. Natan se'ah v'natal se'ah kasher. If you take out a se'ah and you put back in a se'ah, and you put in wayim she'uvim, drawn water, which is puzzle, disqualified, and then you put it in, and then you take out another se'ah. So you still have the majority, it's fine. You can keep doing that. Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Notice this, Rabbi Yochanan says this. Ad rubo. You can keep doing that. Put in, take out a se'ah, right? Put in a se'ah and take out a se'ah. Put in, put out, as long as you have 40 se'ah at every given point, even though you keep adding mayim she'uvim, drawn water, which disqualifies the mikveh, as long as you don't get up to rove, okay, which sounds like, my lav dinishtayer rubo. It sounds like you can do it for 49%, right? You could do it for 19 se'ah, but no, or 19 and a half, but not past that, because you still need to have, right, 20.5 se'ah, let's say, versus 19.5 se'ah. That's going to be the real water, right? The water that kashers the mikveh. Lo, you don't have to say that. When he said ad rubo, de lo nishko rubo, that doesn't prove that he needs rove. He could say, as long as you don't take away more than 50%. So as long as you're at 50%, that's fine. So here you see it's the same thing. Or alternatively, you could say the same claim we made before, which is we assume, now here, the waters are constantly mixing. So you can assume if you took out 19 and a half and, right, or 20 exactly, right? And each time you keep putting in and taking out, you can assume that you might have taken out some of the mayim she'uvim also, right? The puzzle waters. And therefore, we can assume there's a majority still there left. Okay, so here you see that you can take rove. Okay, so the 50-50 works. Okay, 1 second. Right. In other words, you can make the same claim that he made there. In other words, I think I didn't explain it right. What you can say is, if you have a claim she'ani omer, then 50% works. And if you have a claim for saying, even though normally you need rove, right? But in this case, and in the case with the truma, you can assume, you can make certain assumptions. You can assume that there's more left, or that the truma fell into the truma and the chulin fell into the chulin. Back to the Mishna. Now we're going to have some issues with the wording of the Mishna, going totally different topic. Androgynous. Nosei avalonisa. Androgynous can marry a woman because an androgynous is assumed to be a man, according to this. Avalonisa, but can't be married by a man, meaning we can't treat the androgynous as a woman. Let me just read to the end, because we're going to get back to this. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, androgynous chayvim alav skila kezachar. Rabbi Eliezer says an androgynous, if he has relations with a man, then he's chayav skila. He gets stoned like as if he's treated like a man. So first, we're going to deal with the beginning part. Tanan, androgynous no say. So they say, really? He can marry? But he's suffix, right? We always say androgynous is both. How do you know? Male, female. Tane im nasa. It really only is b'diavad. If he did it, then because he has male organ, we're going to assume, okay, we're going to count him as if he's a man for the purposes of marriage. But but wait, it says in the language that sounds like you could even do it l'chatchila, right? If ab initio, you want to marry, go get married to a woman, no problem. So they say, but for sure, the second part is b'diavad. Lo nisa means if someone were to have betrothed him, which he wasn't allowed to have, well, betrothed the androgynous, him, her, right, it. So then that's clearly, then it says it, that androgynous is not betrothed to that man because, right, because that's b'diavad. That's certainly not a lechatchila situation, ab initio. That's only if this were to happen, then it's not the case. So therefore, we're assuming the first case must also be b'diavad because they must be parallel. To which the Gemara says, "Elamai nisa," right? So this is explaining what we just said. "Elamai nisa diavad." No, say nami diavad, since one is b'diavad, it already happened, and we're just referring to what happened. This is also. So amrei lo no say l'chatchila mashma. So they say no. No say really is l'chatchila. Aval lo nisa diavad nami lo. What it's saying is an androgynous can marry a woman, no problem. Even ab initio. That's why it says no say. Aval nisa means, but even if it's already done, a done deal, and a man betrothed this androgynous, that androgynous is not considered married. So that's how they understand it in the end. Because why? Because basically we're treating this androgynous as if it's male. But what's the problem with that? Hamidikatani Seifa, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, and this is what I read before in the end of the Mishna, Rabbi Eliezer says, androgynous chayvim alav skila kezachal, michlal de tanakama sipuke b'sapkale. Androgynous is chayav skila like a man, which sounds like only Rabbi Eliezer thinks he's chayav skila like a man. It sounds like the rabbis wouldn't think he's chayav skila for having relations with another man. So how do we explain that? If we say that according to Tanakama, right, nisa, right, no say, but lo nisa, he can marry, but can't be married by a man. So we say, no, you misunderstood. Bein lamar, mifshak pshitale. Both of them think we treat the androgynous as a male for these purposes. Ikabenayu, what's the machloket then? When he says chayvim skila kezachal, so they're having a machloket about because benayu skila mishnei makomot. Okay, because the androgynous has male and female genitals. Therefore, there's two different ways you can have relations. Either, right, if he's having a relationship, or the androgynous, not he, but again, they're calling him he, so I can call him he. He's having a relationship with a man. So there's two ways they can have it, either as a homosexual sexual encounter or like a male and female would. So basically, we're going to say, right, if Mar Savar Tanakama, who doesn't mention this, right, let's start with Rabbi Eliezer, actually, it's more clear. He says, androgynous chayvim alav skila kezachal, only as a male. Okay, so if a man has a relationship, a sexual encounter with this androgynous, as if they're male and female, there's no mishkav zachor there because we're going to treat him like a female, it as a female for that action, basically. So that's Rabbi Eliezer. So Tanakama, who doesn't say this, must treat this androgynous as zachar for all intents and purposes. Doesn't matter what the sexual encounter was. So Timar Savar chayvim alav skila mishnei makomot. That's Tanakama. Either which way they have relations, it's going to be considered mishkav zachor, and right, which is man having sexual relationship with a man. Umar Savar, right, which is liable skila according to the Torah. Umar Savar kezachal. But Eliezer says only if they did it as two males would have done it. And with that, interesting note, we end today's daf. A little bit graphic at the end there, but I hope you followed the flow from yesterday, right? It's a bit of a complicated topic, but hopefully it's clear and organized now. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and Shavuot Tov.